The winter wind of 1879 whipped through Dustville like a lash across a horse's back. The main street stretched less than a mile, but the gale carried grit and chill so sharp it stung the eyes and cut straight to the bone. Snow had yet to fall, yet the ground was hard as iron, echoing every bootstep and horseshoe strike like hammer blows. The little town, wedged in the barren plains, was a row of wooden buildings with tin-roofed porches and signs that swung on rusted chains. Everything looked raw, gray, stripped of warmth. The door of Grady's General and Pharmacy creaked open, the cold riding in behind Amara Lewis. She pulled her worn wool shawl tight and stepped into the air, thick with dried herbs and resin. Her hand gripped a wicker basket, steadying it against the tremors the wind had left in her. This place was familiar. A midwife was always in need of yarrow, fennel, or pennyroyal. But today, familiarity did nothing to soften the sense of being surrounded. The moment she passed the herb shelves, she felt eyes turn sharp upon her. Something heavy lingered in the room, part curiosity, part contempt, part smug delight. A woman's voice rose from near the shelves, pitched loud enough to drown out the squeal of the ceiling fan. "Look at her, the midwife, but never a mother." The woman beside her gave a thin laugh, turning a jar of dill seed in her hand, speaking just as boldly. "A midwife without children knows nothing but dried weeds. If she'd ever given birth, she wouldn't be so clumsy. Who would trust their child to a woman who couldn't even keep her own?" The words cut clean, like knives pushed slow and deliberate. Amara dropped her eyes to the scrap of paper in her hand, staring at the crooked lines of her list. But the letters blurred, not from the dim lamplight, but from memories that pressed back like an old wound. The fever that took her husband, the newborn who never drew more than a ragged breath. That hollow remained, years later, sharp as ever. She drew in a breath, the sharpness of herbs filling her lungs, biting as the mockery circling her. She set a jar of yarrow gently on the counter, hiding the tremor in her hand. For years she had learned silence, swallowed tears, let storms blow past like dust across the prairie. But this time the woman raised her voice still higher. "God help any child who falls into her hands. A barren woman knows nothing of keeping life." The room went still. The shopkeeper froze in place. An old man by the stove looked up, mouth curling with scorn. Amara stood rigid among glass bottles, her ears filled with the pounding of her own heart. This was the way it had been for years. Tears shed alone in her rented room until they dried to crust. People never wanted truth. They only wanted something to laugh at. And she, a black widow, childless, was the easiest prey. The door banged open, the wind tearing in, scattering papers across the floor. A tall man stepped through, leather coat, heavy, wide-brimmed hat shadowing half his face. His boots struck the boards firm, halting every sound in the shop. Amara lifted her eyes, catching the glint beneath the brim. Caleb Morgan. Everyone in Dustville knew him. A rancher, young still, widowed, raising his boy alone at the valley's edge. Folks said he was a man of few words, fewer smiles, but no one mistook the weight of his gaze. He stopped beside Amara, saying nothing, but turned his eyes on the man who had just laughed. The air tightened. Even the wind seemed to hush at the door. Then his voice came, low and steady. "Enough. This woman has saved more lives than the rest of you combined." 3 words, "enough," fell like a whip crack. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver, not drawn, but enough to make men shift back. The laugher swallowed hard, eyes darting away. The two women bent their heads, pretending to busy themselves with jars. Silence pressed heavy again. Amara stood frozen, her fingers trembling against the list. Her chest felt ready to burst, not from fear, but from the shock of someone finally stepping between her and their scorn. Caleb set coins on the counter with a firm hand. "Her bill goes with mine." Amara shook her head quickly. "That isn't necessary." He leaned closer, voice low, meant only for her. "My boy's been coughing for days. I need your help." His breath carried dust and cold, brushing against her ear. She stiffened, clutching her list tighter. But in those dark eyes she saw no pity, only weariness and resolve. It was no charity, only a plain request. Before she could answer, that same mocking voice came again from the corner. "A woman who lost her own child, saving someone else's? Isn't that a joke?" The words sliced the air. Amara flinched, blood draining from her fingers, vision blurring. Caleb turned at once. His gaze went hard as steel, his tone flat and cutting. "Shut your mouth." Two words, cold enough to freeze the man where he stood. He backed away, pale, lips tight. Caleb had no need to draw steel. His voice alone was weapon enough. Amara lowered her head but felt it, the wall that had risen before her. Years of bearing it alone. And for the first time someone stood in front, not with pity but with respect. The shopkeeper coughed, sliding the bundle of herbs across the counter to break the silence. Caleb nodded once, motioning her to take it. None dared interfere. She gathered the package, hand still unsteady. Caleb bent again, his voice calm. "Come on. Don't let their words touch you anymore." He pushed open the door, letting the wind howl in, scattering papers anew. Amara followed, her pulse hammering, half fear, half something unfamiliar. Behind them, whispers rose again, but his broad back stood between her and the jeers. Outside, the wind clawed sharp and cold. Yet Amara felt lighter, not because the scorn had vanished, but because, for once, it hadn't struck her flesh. Someone had taken the blow. On the steps, Caleb turned, looking down at her. There was no softness in his eyes, no pity, only certainty. And in that certainty lay something Amara had long hungered for. The black horse snorted, breath clouding white in the late-day cold. Caleb Morgan tightened the reins and turned to Amara with a look that brooked no argument. He didn't waste words, just gave a short nod, half invitation, half command. Amara lingered on the pharmacy steps. The prairie wind cut through her thin shawl, needling skin and bone alike. In her ears still rang the sharp laughter, the cutting whispers from inside. But ahead of her, Caleb's gaze pulled like an unseen tether. "My boy," he said, voice rough from hours in the wind. "He needs you. Tonight." There was no room for refusal, nor any reason to give one. Amara dipped her head, gripping the basket of herbs tighter to steady her hand. Caleb extended his, a brief, firm gesture. She hesitated only a breath before setting hers atop it. The worn leather glove was warm against her cold skin, and without meaning to, she looked up. For the first time in years, someone met her eyes not with pity, not with scorn, but with quiet recognition. He guided her down the steps, his hand steady, solid as a wall at her side. The contact was fleeting, yet her heartbeat stumbled, quick and uneven. They moved down Dustville's lone street as lanterns flickered awake. Faces turned, whispers trailed after them. Some looks were curious, some mocking, some sharp with envy. Amara had long grown used to such eyes, but tonight, Caleb's broad back cut a path, unbothered, drawing every gaze onto himself and leaving her to walk beneath his shield. The horse stamped and whickered when Caleb lifted her onto the saddle behind him. She felt the flecks of muscle beneath his coat, smelled the mix of sweat, horsehide, and prairie wind clinging to him. When he turned his head to make sure she was steady, his breath brushed warm against her cheek. "Hold on," Caleb murmured. Her arms went around him, fingers brushing the rise of his chest, steady with each breath. Embarrassment warmed her face, but he didn't glance back, only snapped the reins and sent the horse into the darkening trail. The road to the Morgan Ranch stretched long and rough, over ridges of stone and dried grass. A new moon hung low, silvering the land in thin light. The horse thundered on, wind whipping at Amara's cloak. She pressed her face against Caleb's back to cut the cold, breathing in the faint resin of pine that clung to his coat. Each jolt of the trail drew her closer. Caleb said nothing, yet his calm, measured breaths seemed to set the rhythm for them both. At last, the ranch came into sight. A plain two-story cabin, a barn set off to one side, yellow lamplight flickering faintly in the windows. Only the wind and the horse's breath broke the hush. Caleb swung down first, then reached up. She set her hand in his, sliding to the ground. For an instant, his fingers held hers, tighter than need be, as though unwilling to let go too soon. In the lamp glow, his eyes were dark but steady, carrying something she could not yet name. He pushed the door open. Heat and the bitter tang of medicine swept out. Near the fire, a small bed had been pulled close. A boy of 6 lay there, cheeks flushed, chest heaving in ragged coughs. Noah. Amara's heart clenched at the sound. She set her basket down, sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and laid her hand on his brow. Hot as flame. The boy's eyes fluttered open, wary at the sight of her unfamiliar face. But she met him with a gaze calm and soft, like water on scorched earth. Noah, this is Miss Amara, Caleb said quietly behind her. She's here to help. The boy gave the smallest nod, then shut his eyes again, breath still labored. Amara's hands moved quickly, sure in their work. She drew out herbs, ground and steeped them, the sharp scent filling the room. Caleb stood back, silent, watching every motion. Since his wife's death, no stranger had crossed this threshold. Yet tonight he let Amara sit at his son's bedside, as if it had always been her place. She lifted a spoon to the boy's lips. He grimaced, swallowed, coughed. Her hand smoothed the damp curls on his forehead, gentler than Caleb had seen in years. His life had been work and weather, grit and calloused hands. This small act of tenderness struck him like something long forgotten. Their eyes met across the firelight. She gave the faintest nod, a promise without words, that the boy would see morning. When Noah at last drifted into sleep, Amara rose, bowing her head slightly. He needs rest. The cough is dangerous. I'll come back each day until he's well. Caleb stepped closer, so near she felt his warmth drive back the room's chill. He nodded once. His voice was low, rough. Thank you. 2 simple words, but they landed in her chest like a stone in still water, rippling deep. Years she had heard only disdain, and now, at last, gratitude, plain and sincere. She lifted her gaze and their eyes caught once more. just a heartbeat of shared silence, yet it left her less alone than she had felt in years. The wind rattled the eaves outside. The fire crackled within. And in that small cabin, beneath its dim golden light, three souls, a black widow, a solitary rancher, and a sick child, sat wrapped in the same quiet. No vows were spoken, no promises laid bare. But in that silence, something began that might outlast any oath. Caleb Morgan's cabin had long been accustomed to emptiness. Since the day his wife passed, it had known little more than heavy footsteps and the ragged breath of a child coughing through the night. The pine plank walls bore stains of smoke. The rough-hewn furniture sat in neat order, yet cold, bare of curtains, tablecloths, or any trace of a woman's hand. Amara stepped into the small room where Noah lay sleeping after taking her draft. His thin frame curled beneath a blanket too light for the chill, and the sight pierced her. She set her basket of herbs on the table and drew a chair beside the bed. Firelight flickered across the boy's flushed face, his eyelids heavy with fever. Her hand reached for his brow, burning. He shifted faintly, but did not wake, breath rattling, strained like wind caught in a canyon. She smoothed back the damp curls clinging to his temples, her heart aching with an old, familiar hurt. Memory surged. That night years ago in a rented room at the edge of another town, her own infant daughter, only weeks old, writhing in her arms, fever consuming her. She had prayed, begged, tried every leaf and root she knew, yet still watched life slip away. Her husband followed within days, leaving her with silence that never broke, save for the contempt of neighbors who found in her loss an easy mark. Now, sitting beside Noah, she felt the wound tear open. This child was not her blood, yet every rasp of his breath cut her, echoing grief she had never been allowed to lay to rest. From the doorway, Caleb watched. He had grown used to his son's fevered nights, to his own helpless waiting. But what he saw tonight was different. Amara sat bent toward the boy, her dark shawl sliding down her shoulders, curls escaping their knot and sticking damp against her cheek. Her hand moved slow and sure through Noah's wet hair, steady as a lull. The child eased beneath her touch, his breathing less frantic, his body loosening from its shiver. In that hush, Caleb felt something shift inside him. He had believed this house to be long dead, haunted only by wind through its boards. Yet with this woman present, the room glowed with something warmer than fire. His gaze lingered on her face, lowered, lashes trembling as if holding back tears she would not let fall. He clenched the hand at his side. Strength lived in her frame, yes, but behind it lay loss too deep for words. Amara leaned close, whispering to Noah, her voice soft as prairie wind. "Rest now, child. The night will pass." She knew he could not hear, yet the words were as much a lullaby for her own heart as for his. Each steadier breath from the boy eased her, but also weighed her with the memory of her daughter's silence. She clasped Noah's small hand, feeling the faint beat within, frail yet alive. Caleb stepped forward, boots striking quietly on the planks. Amara looked up, met his shadowed gaze. He gave a single nod, a wordless thanks. Their eyes held, not in judgment, not in pity. Simply two souls, each carrying scars, finding the barest comfort in another's presence. By the time the clock struck 10, Amara still kept vigil. Noah slept soundly, hair damp with sweat. She drew a cloth from her basket, dabbing each drop from his brow. Caleb set a wooden cup of warm water on the table, his fingers brushing hers as he passed it. A small touch, but enough to send her heart stumbling. "You've done more than I thought possible," he said, voice low. Amara gave a faint, wistful smile. "I only do what I know." Simple words, yet he saw the truth beneath. She acted not from knowledge alone, but from wounds endured, from the sharp understanding of loss. Night deepened. Firelight danced on the walls, painting them gold. Amara remained at Noah's side, hand gentle on his hair. Caleb drew a chair closer, settling across from her. Neither spoke, yet the silence between them shortened the space. Outside, the wind moaned. Inside, the boy's breathing evened. And in the brief moments when their eyes met across the bed, something new stirred, fragile, wordless connection. At last, Amara sagged back against the chair, weariness heavy on her. Caleb rose, drew a thick quilt from a side bed, and draped it over her shoulders. The act was quiet, natural, but his hand lingered longer than needed. She opened her eyes, found his fixed on hers, steady, warm, without flourish. She gave a small nod, lips closed. Only the hammering in her chest answered the crackle of the fire. That night, Caleb's empty house no longer felt hollow. In the sound of a child's eased breath, in the weight of two wounded souls meeting halfway, a thin thread began to weave, a thread that might yet hold. Night came swift over Dustville. Heavy clouds smothered the sky. The new moon swallowed whole, leaving a darkness thick as tar across the plains. The Morgan Ranch sat wrapped in silence, broken only by wind cutting through the fence posts and the cry of an owl from the far field. Inside the cabin, the fire had sunk to embers. Noah slept quietly, his breathing steady, the flush fading from his cheeks. Amara rested in the chair beside him, her hand lying light on the bed's edge, as if guarding each small movement. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, pulling his coat tight, eyes sweeping the dark. Something in the wind raised his hackles. A faint trace of cigarette smoke drifted, thin but sure. The ranch stood apart from town. No one had cause to pass this way at night. His hand fell to the butt of his revolver, gaze narrowing. When he turned back, Amara had stepped out too, shawl wrapped close. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low but taut. Before he could answer, a harsh clang split the night, metal on metal, striking again and again at the gate. Both of them froze. Caleb strode down the steps, hand firm on his gun. Amara followed, her heart pounding. In the yellow glow of the porch lamp, she saw it, a ragged doll swinging from the gatepost. Its cotton dress was torn, its button eyes blank. Its body hung upside down, legs bound, head dangling, hair tangled wild in the wind. Amara went still as stone. The sight lashed her back into memory. The night her husband had been beaten near to death on the street. A doll just like this tied to their gate with whispers that another child would not live long. Days later, her daughter was gone to fever. The image had never left her. Her hands shook violently, breath ragged. "No, not again," she whispered, stumbling back against a porch post, eyes wide with terror. A rough laugh cut the dark. Boots crunched gravel. 3 men stepped from the brush by the gate. Shadows stretched long in the lamp's glow. The one in the middle was tall and lean, coat filthy, beard thick and unkempt. Briggs. Heard the Morgan place has company, Briggs drawled, mocking. A colored midwife sitting inside like she belongs. Quite a sight. Caleb moved forward, blocking Amara with his frame. His voice was cold as iron. Get off my land, Briggs. Now. Briggs smirked, shook his head. No rush, just paying respects. Reminding you that a man who shelters what this town spits out will share in her welcome. The two beside him spat into the dirt, laughing. One lifted a finger toward the hanging doll. A little gift, to remind you some things don't belong here. Amara clung to the porch beam, body trembling. Each word struck her like a lash. Each laugh tore open her memory. Fear swelled sharp in her chest, choking her. Caleb's hand tightened on his gun, his glare locked on Briggs. He stepped closer, voice a low growl. Touch this land again, and see what happens. Amara lifted her eyes. Through the breadth of his shoulders she saw him stand, hard and unyielding. Part of her still drowned in panic, but another part knew she was no longer standing alone. Briggs narrowed his eyes, lips twisting. He knew Caleb was quick with a gun, and tonight the man's fury was plain. After a long moment, he gave a sharp whistle. The others cackled. Then the three of them drifted back into shadow. Before he vanished, Briggs turned, his voice oily. Keep your midwife, Morgan, but the price won't be cheap. Their steps faded, leaving only the wind. The doll swung still on the post, an omen cruel and deliberate. Amara's grip gave way. She slid down to the porch steps, her whole frame shaking, eyes blurred with tears. Why is it always me? Why won't they let me be? The words broke, unsure if they were meant for Caleb or the night itself. He knelt beside her, rough hand steady on her shoulder. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Hear me. No one lays a hand on you while you're in this house, no one. His gray gaze was sharp as steel, yet inside it burned something else. Fierce, protective. For a moment, her fear eased. Her breath still quivered, but she had found a wall to lean against. Caleb rose, drew his knife, and strode to the gate. He cut the cord and flung the doll into the dark. The wind tumbled it away, swallowed by night. They'll try again, he said, voice low. But I'll be here, with you. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, eyes still blurred. Yet in the cold wind, she heard his words clear. And for the first time in years, the dark did not swallow her whole. That night, the Morgan Ranch remained quiet. But inside the cabin, two figures sat by the fire longer than usual, one carrying old scars, the other bearing heavy duty. Neither spoke, but their eyes met, and in that silence lay the shape of a promise not yet spoken. The next night, the sky pressed low, heavy with clouds that seemed ready to crush the prairie flat. Wind tore past the eaves of the Morgan Ranch, making the timber groan. Inside the small room, Noah suddenly twisted beneath his blanket, his small body burning like a coal. His breath came hard, his coughs thick and relentless. Amara jolted awake. She had meant only to rest a moment in the chair by the bed, but the child's cries pulled her up at once. Her palm touched his brow, scorching. The fever was fiercer than any yet. Noah, Lord help us. Her voice shook. Caleb was at her side in a heartbeat. He had just stoked the fire. But now he froze, staring at his son writhing, his face drained, the certainty gone from his eyes. He had seen fever take before, his wife's life slipping away, and the thought of reliving it hollowed him. Amara would not allow herself the same paralysis. She snatched open her basket, pulling jars and bundles free. "I need boiling water, now!" Her words cracked like a command. Caleb wasted no time. He rushed to the kitchen hearth, filled a pot, set it on the flames. When he returned, Amara was already shredding leaves, grinding roots, her hands swift and steady. She stirred the herbs into the steaming water, the sharp scent filling the room. Noah thrashed, lips parched, eyes shut tight. Amara lifted his head gently, pressing a wooden spoon of bitter medicine to his mouth. He resisted, lips clamped. Her hand soothed down his back, her whisper soft. "Drink, little one, just a little. It will make you well." At last he parted his lips, swallowing in tiny gulps. Caleb stood behind, fists white, watching every motion as though his own strength depended on it. Time dragged heavy. Amara changed cool cloths again and again, pressing them to Noah's brow and chest. Sweat poured from the boy, his hair damp. She bent low, listening to his chest. His heart raced, but held steady. The sight dragged her into memory. Her daughter's fever had burned just as fiercely, and then the silence after. That night she had been alone, her hands shaking, her prayers unanswered. She gripped the bed frame hard, teeth clenched. Not this time. Not again. "You will not go, not this time," she whispered, eyes red. Caleb heard. He sank into the chair beside her, staring at Noah, then at her. A strangled sound escaped him, raw with fear he had long buried. "Amara," his voice rasped. I can't lose anyone else." The words stripped him bare. His broad shoulders trembled, his calloused hands covering his face. He had stood firm against storm, against steel, against men who would see him ruined. Yet before his child's fever, he broke. Amara raised her eyes. She no longer saw the hard rancher, but a father trembling on the edge of despair. She reached out, her hand brushing his. Just a touch, but it lifted his head. His eyes shone wet, desperate. "You won't lose him," she said, her tone steady, stronger than her own belief. "I swear it." Their eyes locked. Between the acrid smoke of herbs, the labored rasp of the boy, and the storm outside, a vow passed. Silent, unseen, but binding. The night stretched on. Amara did not leave the bedside, her hand ever on Noah's brow, changing cloths, feeding drops of medicine, murmuring words like lullabies. Caleb never strayed far, rising now and then to tend the fire or fetch water. But always his gaze returned to her, as though she alone held the thread that kept his son tethered. Near midnight, Noah's skin broke in sweat. The fever began to ebb. His breath slowed, steadier, less strained. Amara laid one last cloth to his brow, then slumped into her chair, tears spilling, whether from exhaustion or relief she could not say. Caleb's hand found her shoulder, rough and warm, trembling. "Thank you." His voice caught, raw. She lifted her head, meeting his eyes. They were cracked with pain, yet full of gratitude. This time she did not look away. Their gaze held, longer than courtesy required. His hand lingered on her shoulder. She did not move it off. She let it rest there, a weight that was burden and anchor both. Noah stirred, sighed, then drifted deeper into sleep. Both bent toward him, then exhaled together, their relief twined. When they turned back, the space between them was close enough for breath to mingle. Just a moment, and Amara drew away, fingers tightening in her lap. Yet her heart hammered not with fear, but with something different, something closer, something she dared not yet name. Outside, the storm raged wild. Inside, the fire burned bright. And in that weary silence, a bond took root. Not healer and patient, not midwife and widowed father, but two souls scarred by loss, daring to find in one another a fragile, unnamed hope. That night, when the fever at last broke and left Noah sleeping easy, the Morgan Ranch fell into a silence unlike any before. The boy's breath was steady, his cheeks flushed with health again. Amara sat quietly at his side, her hand resting over his small one, eyes heavy with fatigue but unwilling to look away. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, watching. The lamplight carved his face, strong, worn, yet softened. For the first time in many nights, he wasn't counting each shallow rise of his son's chest. He looked instead at Amara and saw more than the midwife who had saved Noah. He saw the one who had pulled him back from despair. Amara. His voice was low, rough, carrying in the hush of the little room. She lifted her head. Her dark eyes caught the light, glimmering with exhaustion and a fragile relief. "You should rest, Caleb," she whispered. "There'll be work at the barn come morning." He stepped in, stopping beside her, gaze falling to his sleeping boy. "Tomorrow can wait. Tonight, I need to thank you." She shook her head. "No, I only did what had to be done. The boy lived because he fought to." Caleb turned, his eyes locking on hers. That look stripped away her careful composure. "No, Amara. You stayed. You held him when I could only sit helpless. Without you, I don't know if I'd still be standing." The words were plain, yet so raw they left no space for distance. Beyond the window, autumn wind sifted through the boards, carrying the damp scent of earth. The lamp flame wavered, their shadows drawn long upon the wall. Amara felt her chest ache, not from weariness, but from the swell of something she had tried to keep buried since the day he stood before her in the pharmacy. "Caleb," she breathed, faltering, "you don't need more burden. I'm not someone this town will ever accept. You know that." He was silent a moment, then set his calloused hand over hers, steadying its tremor. "This town doesn't feed me. It doesn't raise my son. You're the one who brought life back into this house. Amara, I don't care what they say." Her eyes dropped, tears pressing sharp. For years she had been the outsider, watched, judged, whispered against. Yet under his gaze, she felt for the first time seen whole. The room stilled. Noah shifted once, then settled, granting them a rare space. Caleb reached, lifting her chin gently. His eyes searched hers for a wordless answer. She gave none, but her breath came quick, and her gaze held. It was enough. He bent and pressed his mouth to hers. At first she stiffened, heart pounding, memories dragging her back to loss. But the warmth of him, the taste of smoke and pine, the steadiness of his embrace, dissolved her guard. Her arms slipped around his broad shoulders, trembling but sure, as though daring to trust once more. The kiss deepened, unhurried, the confession of two broken souls finding one another. Caleb lifted her from the chair, carrying her to the larger room. The door shut behind, moonlight spilling through its cracks, laying silver across their joined shadows. In that moment, the taunts, the dolls hung in malice, the weight of old grief, all vanished. There was only the thrum of hearts, the clutch of hands, and the warmth long denied. His breath brushed her ear, hoarse with feeling. Not pity, not loneliness. I choose you. Amara closed her eyes as tears slipped free. This time they were not for what was lost, but for being chosen, for being loved. That night they belonged to one another, not in haste, but in healing. Each touch, each breath, stitched over the rips in their hearts. The house that had stood hollow now pulsed with the warmth of love finally spoken. When dawn spilled across the prairie, the fields before the ranch shone gold. Amara woke in Caleb's arms, a quilt drawn over them. Roosters crowed far off, wind brushed gently through the fences. Noah slept sound in the other room, his breath steady. She stirred, but Caleb's arm tightened, holding her close. His eyes stayed shut, his voice rumbling soft. Stay. Stay with me. She turned, studying his face in the morning light. Strong, scarred, yet open, unguarded. For the first time in years, she whispered, yes. One word, but it carried the weight of a promise. On the third morning after that fateful night, Amara walked beside Caleb into Dustveil's market for salt, cloth, and a few vials of herb oil for Noah. The prairie shone bright with sun, yet the town's main street seemed choked with stares. The woman at the bakery paused in kneading dough, whispering to the one beside her. The blacksmith wiped sweat from his brow and smirked. The clatter of shoes on the boardwalk rang with judgment. Amara drew her shawl tighter, lowering her eyes. She knew she was the center of their gaze. In only 2 days, whispers had filled the town that Amara, a black widow, had spent the night at the Morgan Ranch, that she was using Caleb's grief to climb into his life. Some said Noah had called her mama in his fever, and that it shamed the memory of Caleb's late wife. Caleb strode steady at her side, but he heard it all, the half-laughs, the pointed tones. His grip on the basket handle whitened his knuckles. As they passed the saloon, a shrill voice cut across the street. Caleb Morgan, a name worth something, yet you've no care left for your own standing. It was Mrs. Whitfield, the banker's wife, mother to Clarissa. She wore fox fur, tapping a fan against her palm, 2 hulking men at her back as if guarding treasure. Caleb stopped. I've nothing to say to you. Her painted lips curved. Oh, but we both know you do. My family kept your ranch alive when your barn burned last year. That loan was my husband's doing. In return, you promised to consider Clarissa. Amara froze. The rumors fell into place. Clarissa Whitfield, the blonde belle of Dustveil, praised as its rose. This was no idle talk. The Whitfields meant to bind Caleb with marriage, folding the Morgan Ranch into their hold. Caleb's jaw tightened. I promised nothing but repayment, and I'll pay every cent. Mrs. Whitfield gave a thin laugh. You can pay, but the town won't forget. Clarissa is the rightful lady of that ranch, not some lesser creature. Her eyes flicked toward Amara, slicing like a knife. Amara's body locked. The words echoed every wound she'd ever borne. The sneers, the sidelong glances. For a moment, she longed to turn, to leave, to spare Caleb the burden of her presence. But Caleb stepped forward, placing himself square before her, his voice cut sharp. Mind your tongue. The market hushed. Hands stilled, eyes turned. Mrs. Whitfield faltered, then gave a bitter laugh. You'd choose her over my daughter? Caleb Morgan, you'll regret it. He answered nothing, only tightened his grip on the basket and caught Amara's hand in his. His palm was rough, burning warm, closing around her trembling fingers. Before the eyes of Dustville, he led her through the market, not letting go. Back at the ranch, Amara pulled her hand free. Her voice shook. You shouldn't have. You don't need to stand against the whole town for me. Caleb faced her, his eyes steady, fierce. Amara, I lost once by holding my silence. This time, I won't let anyone decide for me. Her breath caught. In his gaze she saw no rashness, only resolve. It cracked the wall she had built around herself. That evening, with Noah asleep, Amara sat on the porch, staring into the dark sweep of prairie. The words from the market still rang. Lesser, outsider, unworthy. The door opened. Caleb stepped out, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. He set one in her hands, the warmth drawing her back. Amara. His voice was slow, heavy as stone. I don't care what the town wants. I only know. From the night Noah burned with fever, from the night you stayed, this house stopped being empty. I've made my choice. Her head bent, tears slipping silent, falling on the hand clutching the cup. She said nothing, but her trembling breath gave answer enough. Caleb's hand covered hers, strong, certain. And in that moment, no matter Dustvile's whispers, no matter Whitfield's threats, the truth stood plain. Caleb's choice was her. Night settled deep, the prairie wind stretching long. The Morgan Ranch was small against the weight of power and rumor, yet in the clasp of hands and the meeting of eyes, there lay something stronger, an unshakable choice. The rumors in Dustville did not die down. Each day they grew louder, like flames fed oil. They said Caleb Morgan had been bewitched, that he betrayed the memory of his dead wife, that the Morgan Ranch was about to fall into the hands of an outsider. Each whisper, each glance, cut across Amara's back like a blade. Caleb kept silent for days, but silence was never a shield. The Whitfields knew it well. On a Saturday morning, when the town square swelled with the bustle of market day, the family made their move. Clarissa Whitfield arrived with her parents. She wore a gown of deep blue silk, a feathered hat set just so, her stride practiced as though she could step into any house she pleased. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling as they passed. Mr. Whitfield, mustache waxed and gleaming, raised his voice so all could hear. Caleb Morgan, all this town knows my family lifted you up after your loss. Now it is time you honor your word, to give the Morgan Ranch the wife it deserves. Clarissa, my daughter, is the only rightful choice. Every gaze turned toward Caleb, standing at the saloon porch beside Amara. Amara froze, her heart hammering, her hands clenching the edge of her shawl. She knew one word from him, yes or no, would decide everything. Clarissa stepped forward, her smile wide with pride. Caleb, she called sweetly, voice pitched to Carrie, you could end all this ugly talk today. Choose me, and you'll have the respect of Dustville. The air went still. Amara heard her own heart beating, the thought striking sharp. He must let go, for the ranch, he must. But Caleb stepped forward. His eyes swept the crowd, then fixed on Clarissa. In the bright sun, his gray eyes shone like steel. No. His voice rang out, hard, final. Every murmur stopped at once. Clarissa blinked, stunned. What did you say? I will not choose you. I will not choose your family. I choose Amara Lewis. Gasps broke like thunder across the square. Amara's eyes flew wide, her whole body rigid. Caleb turned, caught her hand, and lifted it high for all to see. This woman saved my son's life. This woman breathed life into a house that was near dead. And this woman, though you sneer and mock, is the one I choose to stand beside me. The square erupted. Shocked cries, harsh laughter, curses, all tangled in the air. Mrs. Whitfield flushed crimson, her fan trembling. "You've lost your mind, Caleb! You dare insult my family before the whole town?" Caleb stood firm. He released Amara's hand and stepped closer to them. "Your family may hold the bank. You may own half the land in this valley. But you do not own my heart. I have paid your debt, every dollar. And this—" He turned, his gaze softening as it found Amara. "This is no debt. This is choice." A roar of talk rose again, disapproval and disbelief swirling like a storm. Amara nearly staggered under the weight of it, but Caleb came back to her side, shielding her with his frame. Mr. Whitfield sneered. "You'll pay for this, Morgan. You, your ranch, and that choice of yours." Caleb answered nothing. His hand closed firm on Amara's shoulder, guiding her through the crowd. The eyes burned, the whispers hissed, but he walked steady, and for the first time she let herself follow. On the road home, prairie wind whipped dust into the air. Amara's tears fell unchecked. You didn't have to do that. They'll destroy you because of me." Caleb stopped, turned, and set his hands on her shoulders. His eyes burned fierce yet tender. "Amara, I have lost too much by staying silent. I will not let them rule my life again. Even if I must stand before all Dustville, I'll say what I said today." Her tears spilled, yet her lips trembled into a smile. In that moment, all the years of scorn, the ghosts of shame, seemed washed away by a single public vow. That night, lights glowed in the Morgan ranch. Amara sat on the porch, Caleb beside her, both staring out across the dark plain. The distant glimmer of town lights lingered, like eyes watching. But here, with his strong arm around her shoulders, she knew the truth had been spoken, and there was no turning back. The storm of opposition had risen, but so too had something greater. Their love no longer hid in shadow. It burned bright, a flame held high before the town. Days after Caleb's public stand, Dustville split down the middle. Some held their tongues, others sharpened them crueler than ever. But what stole Amara's sleep was not gossip alone. Night after night she woke with her heart pounding, the image of that doll swinging upside down on the ranch gate burning in the dark. She spent long hours on the porch, staring into the endless black of the prairie. Caleb never pressed her with questions, but he saw it in her eyes. A grief unnamed, a shadow yet to be spoken. One afternoon, with Caleb gone to town for seed, Amara took Noah out back to air the blankets. The boy, stronger now, scampered in circles, chirping "Mama Amara" with innocent glee. Each time she heard it, her chest tightened, warmth and ache bound together. She knew then Noah had chosen her, whether the world did or not. But as he played, Noah stopped short, eyes fixed toward the fringe of woods beyond the ranch. Amara followed his gaze, and her breath caught. There stood a man, half hidden, moving with a limp. His hat drooped low, masking his face. He stayed only a moment, then pursed his lips and whistled a tune, brief, sharp, and chillingly familiar. Amara staggered back, her lungs tight. Briggs. She knew it instantly, and with that whistle, A memory she had locked deep burst open. Years before, the night her daughter burned with fever, while her husband still lived, a stranger had come knocking. He reeked of whiskey, his eyes cold as stone. He had hung a doll upside down on their door latch and rasped, "That child won't live till morning. It's already been decided." By dawn, the baby was gone. Amara had long believed it was cruel coincidence, the work of fate. But now, hearing that whistle again, the pieces snapped together. It had been Briggs. He was there that night. She clutched Noah close, her body shaking. "Inside now," she whispered, dragging him with her. But inside her, truth roared awake. Briggs wasn't just a thug hounding Caleb. He had haunted her life long before, a specter delivering doom. When Caleb returned, she told him, voice breaking. His face darkened. "Amara, are you sure?" She nodded, tears spilling. "I'll never forget that whistle. Briggs was there, the night my baby died." Caleb's jaw clenched, veins tight at his temple. Then he wasn't acting alone. A man like Briggs doesn't pick a poor family at random. Someone sent him. His words struck her silent. Then the blade of memory cut deeper. Her husband had owed money back then. The creditor, Whitfield, he had threatened to take back what was owed if they failed. Her chest twisted. "Caleb, do you think Whitfield?" He didn't answer at once. He turned to the fields, shoulders locked. They sow fear to keep control. They prove no one crosses them and survives. If it's true, then your child's death wasn't fate. It was a message. Amara sank into a chair, hands covering her face. His words crashed, like thunder inside her. For years she had carried the weight of helplessness, believing destiny had stolen her child. But the truth bared itself now. It had been no act of God, but of men. Tears poured, not of sorrow, but of fury. "My baby died because of them," she whispered, voice ragged, yet a fire rising within. Caleb dropped to one knee before her, his hand steady on her trembling shoulders. "Hear me, Amara. We will not let them keep this hold. They think they can crush the weak. But now they'll face truth. They'll face both of us." She lifted her head. In his eyes she saw flame, the same fire that had ignited within her. For the first time, her grief was no longer hers alone. It had become a force shared. That night, she did not sleep. She sat at the window, eyes on the dark horizon, her heart brimming with strange resolve. Briggs was no shadow now. He was a piece of the truth. And Whitfield, the man the town revered, was the hand behind it. She pressed her palm to her chest, whispering like a vow, "My child, I won't let them escape." Outside, wind scoured the prairie, cold and wild, heralding storm. But this time, Amara was ready to face it. The moon climbed high, laying a pale sheet of silver across the endless prairie. The Morgan Ranch stood still in the wind, its fences whispering like voices from the past. Inside, the hearth still burned, but Amara could not sit still. She stepped out onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight. The night air was cool, yet her chest burned with fire. The truths unearthed in Dustville would not quiet. Briggs, Whitfield, the cruel death of her child. She had spent a lifetime bowed beneath what she believed was fate. Now she knew it had never been fate. It was men, and she would not run anymore. Caleb appeared quietly behind her, as though sleep had left him too. He set a hand on the porch post, his gaze sweeping the black prairie. "You can't rest either." Amara turned. In the moonlight, his face carried weariness, yet his eyes shone with resolve. "No. I can't pretend all will be well. Briggs was there. Whitfield sent him. My daughter didn't die by God's hand. She died by theirs. And if I keep silent," her voice broke, though her eyes blazed, "I will keep on losing." Caleb nodded slowly, as though he had waited to hear her say it. "I know. I've lived that way myself. I stayed quiet when they pushed Clarissa at me. I stayed quiet when they mocked Amara Lewis. But silence only convinces them they've already won. I won't stay quiet again." The wind cut through, tossing Amara's hair, but she did not lower her head. For the first time she stood tall, meeting Caleb's eyes without flinching. "Will you stand with me?" Caleb laid his calloused hand over hers. The touch was slow, deliberate, a vow in itself. "Not just with you, Amara. I swear I'll protect Noah, protect you, and protect this home. We are no longer two survivors. From this night, we are one." Her eyes glistened. For years, no man had ever spoken to her that way. Not out of pity, not with hollow courtesy, but with a clear choice. She tightened her hand over his. "Then let's swear it together, Caleb. No matter how much land or power Whitfield has, no matter if Briggs returns with his whole pack, we will not run. This is our home. Noah is our son. I will not let any hand touch him again." Caleb drew her into his chest, his arms strong around her. His breath burned against her ear, his voice low and etched into the wood of the porch itself. "Whoever lays a hand on you, on Noah, on this land, will have to step over my body first." They stood that way for a long while, their shadows merging into one under the moon. In his arms, Amara felt Caleb's heartbeat, steady, strong, like a drum keeping her upright. From the room inside, Noah stirred, mumbling, "Mama, Papa," before drifting back into sleep. The sound was small, yet it filled the porch, sealing the vow. Amara lifted her face, tears bright at the corners, but a rare smile broke through. "Do you hear that? Noah called you Papa. The boy has chosen." Caleb leaned his dahon, forehead to hers, whispering, "Then we cannot retreat." That night, they spoke little else. They sat side by side on the steps, hands still clasped, watching the prairie drowned in moonlight. No longer victims, no longer resigned. Two people, scarred by loss, now ready to stand against a whole town if need be. For the sake of a fragile home they would not surrender. And in the wind's long song, Amara whispered a promise to the spirit of the child she once lost. "I will not let another child be taken, not ever again." Caleb heard and pressed her hand tighter, sealing it into bone and blood. From this night forward, they would never stand alone. That morning, Dustville was louder than usual. The market swelled with wagons circling the square, voices calling across stalls, the clatter of hooves and wheels filling the air. Amara wrapped her old shawl around her shoulders, walking nervously beside Caleb. She had not wanted to return to town after all the tension of recent days, but Caleb had said, "It's time." Noah sat in his father's arms, his cheeks flushed, eyes bright after his illness. The boy chattered happily all the way, oblivious to the stares they drew. When the wagon stopped at the square, Amara's stomach tightened. The air itself seemed to thicken. People had already noticed them. Whispering rose from the saloon doorways, from the fabric stall, from the bakery window. The gossip had not faded. It swelled back stronger. But Caleb didn't falter. He carried Noah, took Amara's hand, and led them straight to the middle of the square. Noon sunlight blazed across his broad shoulders. The crowd fell quiet, eyes narrowing in expectation. Caleb stopped, set Noah on his feet, then pulled Amara forward beside him. The whole square seemed to freeze. "Dustville," his voice rang out clear and commanding. "You've whispered long enough. Hear me now. I, Caleb Morgan, choose Amara Lewis, not from debt, not from pity, but from my heart. This woman will be my wife and the mother of Noah." The crowd erupted. Gasps, sharp laughter, murmurs of disbelief swept like a storm. Amara's chest constricted. Caleb had spoken words she never imagined could be real. Here, in the very square where she had been spat upon and shamed. From the steps of the dress shop, Clarissa Whitfield laughed aloud. "You would propose to a black widow, poor and pitiful, in the center of Dustville? Caleb, you've just destroyed your life." Caleb turned, his tone cold as iron. "I've not destroyed my life. I've finally begun to live it. And I will live it with her." Then, before them all, he dropped to one knee in the dirt. His rough hand trembled slightly as he pulled out a silver ring, once his wedding band, reforged by his own hand in the forge. He looked up at Amara, eyes dark and unwavering. "Amara Lewis, I choose you. Do you choose me?" Her legs nearly gave way. Tears stung hot, blurring her vision. She had only ever known scorn, never once a man brave enough to choose her openly, to stand against an entire town and speak such words. Then Noah tugged at her skirt, his little face lifted, voice bright and innocent. "Mama, say yes." The sound cracked the silence. A child's word, simple, guileless, echoed louder than any proclamation. Amara dropped to her knees, clutching him tight, her tears falling into his hair. Then she lifted her gaze to Caleb, lips trembling. "Yes, I choose you." Shouts broke from the edge of the market. A few clapped, some even cheered. Not the whole of Dustville, but not silence either. For the first time they were not alone. Some faces softened, others bowed their heads. None could deny it. A man had knelt, a boy had called, and a woman had been chosen. Caleb rose, slipped the ring onto her hand, and clasped it tight. Then he drew both Amara and Noah into his arms, right there in the center of the square. Mrs. Whitfield turned pale with fury, storming away in a flurry of heels. Yet the crowd's eyes no longer followed her. They followed the family just born before their eyes. That evening, back at the ranch, Amara sat quietly on the porch, turning the silver ring in the last light of day. Caleb set Noah in the hammock and sat down beside her. "You all right?" he asked softly. Amara smiled through tears, her voice steady. "For the first time in my life, I don't feel small. For the first time, I belong." Caleb took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "And you will always belong here. Nothing can change that." The prairie stretched vast, Dustville still full of whispers. But beneath the fading sun, in his unyielding arms, Amara knew the tide had turned. Even if not everyone accepted it, Their love, spoken aloud, unashamed, was now a truth no one could erase. Spring returned to the Dust Vale Prairie, but this season was unlike those before. The Morgan Ranch, once little more than barren ground, echoing with the cough of a sick child, now brimmed with life. The barn stood straight again, planks solid and roof gleaming beneath the sun. Strong cattle grazed across the wide pasture. Fences stretched long and true, no longer sagging, but standing as proof of endurance. On the porch, the wildflowers Amara had planted bloomed in soft purple, spilling color across the sky's edge. Amara stood on the steps, apron dusted with flour, a cloth still in her hand. She looked out toward the fields, where Caleb rode alongside Noah. The boy's laughter rang clear, carrying far, a sound so pure it seemed to erase the shadows that had once weighed this house down. Even the town began to change. At first they only watched from a distance, whispering. But then someone came asking Amara how to brew a remedy. Another asked Caleb to mend a fence. When the baker's son was struck with fever, it was Amara who held the boy through the night until the sickness broke. The next morning, his mother gripped Amara's hands in the middle of the market and said with trembling voice, "Thank you, Mama Amara." That name spread fast. It was no longer just Noah who called her so, but the children of Dustville. At first, the title stirred unease in a few, but little by little it became truth, one no one could deny. If today's story stirred your heart, or brought back a memory of your own, we invite you to share a few words in the comments below. We would love to hear your stories, your reflections, each one another thread in this circle of kinship across the screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so more hearts may be warmed by these Wild West love stories. We'll see you again soon in the next tale, where love always finds its way home.